Alexia. Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to be chatting with you about a story that I'm personally incredibly excited to tell, which is the story behind Figma Slides. And so many of you might know this was actually a bottoms-up project within Figma. It was something that was born out of a Maker Week project, and I'm really excited to share with you the story of how it came to life. So last week, we launched Figma Slides to the world for the first time ever. And ever since that launch, there are two questions that I've gotten over and over again. The first is, how did you get the idea? And the second is, how should I, normally a designer, work with my PM to ship the things that I really believe in? And for this question, I'd like to up-level it a little bit to, how should I, anyone with an idea, work with my company to ship the things that I believe in? So let's start with the first question. How did you get the idea? So before I worked on Figma Slides, I actually joined Figma on FigJam, and I was the second PM on FigJam. And when I joined the company, a lot of people ask Figmates, okay, you work at Figma, like what's it like building Figma inside of Figma? It's kind of, this is a colleague on my team with a tweet on the topic. And the reality is that we use Figma actually pretty similarly to most other companies. But on the other hand, we use FigJam on steroids. Not only do we use it for our brainstorms and retros, but we use it for our Gantt charts, our team kickoffs, our sprint planning, our product reviews, our all-hands, our Q&As, and more. And why do we do this? Well, what's really interesting is that in a FigJam file, it's not just the loudest or the most senior person in the room talking. It's everyone. And so when someone's presenting, you kind of have something going on that looks like this. Someone will ask a question. Someone else will answer the question asynchronously on a sticky. A third person might chip in with more information. And folks across the file are going to thumbs up and +1 and heart in order to express their enthusiasm, or in some cases, their dissent. And not only is this one conversation happening, but there are probably 20 such conversations happening across the file. And it's incredibly efficient to be able to have all of these things happening simultaneously. And so I would go and talk to various folks who worked in tech, and I would say, like, okay, you guys should make your presentations in FigJam as well. And I would get something like this, which is, I like that for you. Some people were really excited and would adopt it, but majority would say this. And the reason is that we kind of learned that when people are presenting, not only does the presentation need to be dynamic, but they also crave a certain level of visual fidelity. And so kind of began the idea of how do we build a tool that has the visual control of Figma and the interactive storytelling mechanisms of FigJam. Not to mention, we had that 3.5 million number that seemed to corroborate this hypothesis. OK, so that's how the idea was born. And the second question is, how should I, anyone with an idea, work with my company to ship the things that I believe in? So the reality is, something that I learned is that words alone are rarely that powerful. Once I had the idea, I actually spent months talking to different people about it and trying to convince them that we should invest in this area. And they were kind of like, maybe, Mihika, like maybe sometime in the future. And it got nowhere. And so what actually happened was on August 25th in 2022, we had a PM offsite where we talked about problems and opportunities we should consider focusing on. And I raised presentations as a problem/opportunity that we should consider focusing on, and worked with a small pod in order to decide on a set of next steps. There were 3 next steps. 1, build something during the next Maker Week, and Maker Week is our internal hackathon. Second, determine to what extent this new tool should be a combination or built on top of our existing products, Figma and FigJam, versus being a net new product. And then third is, spin up a pod and hashtag ship it. So let's go to the first. This is a FigJam file where our Maker Week pitch sessions happen. We have the entire company jump into a single file and give all of their ideas. And I threw out a sticky for Slides, aka Flides, making a Slides product that has the visual fidelity of Figma along with the feedback mechanisms of FigJam. As you can see, this got a lot of love. And so I went around the New York office basically begging people to work with me. And one engineer, Dorothy, said yes, and then subsequently recruited her entire team to help out. And we built a prototype of the product in a single week. And here's actually a video recording of the pitch demo where I pretended that Maker Week presentations were due and I hadn't started. And luckily, I had a new tool, Slides, to help me out. The chat during the demo went wild. And suddenly, the idea was bigger than myself. There's Dylan saying, oh my God, a lot of people saying ship it. There's a comment a little bit lower, which I love a lot, from Noah, flied me to the moon. I agree. Let's fly everyone to the moon. And I think that what was really incredible was the momentum of this project had just gotten really big. And so, step one, build something during the next Maker Week, was complete. Then there is step two. To what extent is this product its own product versus building on top of Figma? So one thing that's kind of interesting is, so many of you raised your hands for having built files inside of Figma before and built presentations in Figma before. And that could have been a starting point for us. We could have started by launching a tool that effectively took Figma, added speaker notes, made animations easier, and gone with that. But what we actually heard from people is that their biggest pain point with designing presentations inside of Figma was the fact that their collaborators could not join them, and that every single time they had to go and work with the rest of their team, they were going to export. We have people saying that Figma is straight up exclusionary. And so that's how we built faith in the idea that we should actually build a standalone product. Shortly after the Maker Week, we had a meeting with Dylan where I presented this deck on Slides, why and how Figma could build storytelling. We talked about the visual control of Figma and the interactive storytelling mechanisms of FigJam. And we talked about competitors, and specifically asserted that Figma had both collaboration and visual fidelity, and most tools kind of only have one. Dylan's response was that we couldn't build a tool just because we thought we could do better than our competition, but that we actually needed to know if this product was successful, what would the world look like? And so, in January of 2023, we kicked off a vision sprint for Figma Slides. And we were on the clock. It was a 1-month vision sprint with me, Ian, our designer, Gus, our researcher, and Alex, our engineer. And what's pretty interesting is when you talk to most people about product development, they tell you that there's like a right way to do things. And the right way normally looks something like this. You start with research, do that for a little bit, then flip to design, do that for a little bit, then pass off to engineering, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time for that. We had a deadline right around when research would have wrapped up. It was pretty tough. And so I think we violated all the laws of product development. And we did research, design, and engineering all at the same time. So what does this look like, actually? This means that design started on day 0, and we started designing not necessarily what we heard, but what we thought people would want. And then those designs would go into research. And then in research, every single day, we would go and we would ask questions. And we would change the questions we asked every single day based on what we heard, which if you are a researcher in the audience, I'm sure that you're cringing. But what this meant was we were able to learn a lot and get signal on so many different things in just the span of a month. And then on the engineering side, we weren't actually building the product because that wasn't the goal of this phase. But what we were doing was for the areas that we were building conviction, we were ensuring that they were technically feasible and de-risking them in that regard. And so on February 13th, 2023, we presented the Slides Vision Sprint to the Figma executive team. And specifically, we debuted a two-part strategy. The first was a new presentation experience where we wanted to not just build a tool for stories, but a tool for conversations, just as you saw inside of FigJam. And then the second is on the creation side. It was incredibly important to, quote, deliver on the Figma promise and the visual fidelity and the craft that people expect from our platform. And so what I want to do is actually show some of the prototypes that Kian, our phenomenally talented designer, made for this vision deck. So here you can see the early innings of the alignment scale and the pole, which we just saw earlier today. Here we have the ability to easily pull in mocks and prototypes, another demo that many folks have been incredibly excited about. And one fun fact is we are soon going to be giving users the ability to snap on a device frame easily to their images. Third, a command center for the presenter. So this was the first design/prototype of our presentation view, where folks could, for the first time ever on the Figma platform, access their speaker notes. And last but not least, the first prototype of the infamous tone dial. And I got a lot of advice as we pulled together this vision deck. Yuki, in particular, gave me a piece of advice, which was, you really need to make people feel. Every section of the deck was actually preceded by putting people into a different set of shoes and having them imagine the different starting points that they could have when interacting with the presentation. I got advice from Sho, our VP of product, to use marketing language to really help the audience feel like they were the user. And so we had one slide like this, where you can see each of these three pillars is actually talking not to our executive team, but to a user. So imagine that you can engage your users in a two-way dialogue. Imagine that you can build a source of truth. Imagine that you can build with design that can't be broken. And last but not least, I got feedback from Chris, our CTO, and Yuki, our CPO, that told me that Dylan might stop paying attention. And so what I did was, you normally have presentations that look like this. And you're like, OK, Mihika, my presentations don't look like a triangle, but let me explain. You normally have all the context setting up front. You're going to talk about all the problems. You're going to talk about all the research. And then at the bottom, you're going to show what you want to ship. Now, in this presentation, we flipped that on its head. We started with almost no context, and we got right into the designs and prototypes as fast as possible. Remember, words aren't that powerful. Mocks, visuals, and prototypes are. And so here you can see this is the deck. And over there, that white section is the context. It's like very small. And over here are all of the pain points, solutions, and user proof points to justify our vision. And so we not only determined to what extent this product was the interop of existing products versus a new product, but we built a vision to back it. Step 3, spin up a pod and hashtag ship it. So here, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Figma Slides team came to be. Now, I got a piece of advice when I was in college that I've never forgotten, which was that if you're trying to recruit someone to something, if you need to try really hard, like really, really hard, like bend over backwards to convince that person to join you, maybe you'll feel satisfied if they say yes, but they're probably the wrong person. Every single person on the Figma Slides team was begging their manager to join. And so here we have a message from John, the first engineer on Figma Slides, telling Alice, his manager, that he was interested in jamming on Slides. This was January 12th. John did not give up. On February 16th, 3 days after the vision pitch, John followed up again. He asked what the deal with staffing was. Fast forward, March 2nd, he got some news from Alice. He was joining the Slides team. It was incredibly exciting. John spent every single day asking his manager if he could join the Slides team, and he made it on, and went on to be one of our most phenomenal engineers, not only kind of setting the standard from a technical acumen perspective, but he also had this incredible habit of documenting all the work that he was doing, sharing it out in Slack rather than having it buried inside of a GitHub link, and getting everyone around him amped up. So he recently actually shared this weekend the 76 video recordings that he's had of Figma Slides all throughout the course of its development, and here are 4 of the videos. The one in the top right is actually the first ever video recording of Figma Slides. Okay, so something that most people don't know is that coming into this year, Figma Slides was not actually on the docket for config. And a lot of people all over the company were really skeptical that it would be ready. And I found this really hard. In my mind, it was like, of course this thing is going to be ready, and of course this thing is going to be magical. Well, Sho gave me a piece of advice, which was, if the product is ready, there's no world where it wouldn't actually ship. And I would say this piece of advice is really what kept me going. Now, if you are working with your team and trying to generate bottoms-up momentum for a project, it is on you to stoke the flames and make sure that a fire burns bright so that anyone around the company can see it. Maker Week was the first example of this, the Vision Sprint was the second example of this, and now I'm going to tell you about the third example. So in January of last year, we had our sales kickoff, which was the first all hands of the year. And I DM'd Yuki, and I was pitching him on it would be really cool if we took the SCO talks, or the sales kickoff talks, and made them inside of slides. I was promptly overruled by someone on the IT team who told us that it was not feasible due to production requirements. Then Yuki back-channeled and saved the day. Well, we got the green light to use Figma Slides for this presentation. And let me be honest, it was probably arguably wrong to push the product this early. Let me tell you why. It was not really working at this point. This was around a year, and no, this was earlier this year. This was 6 months ago, and the product had barely shipped. It was very buggy all of a sudden. The video thing was being annoying. Chris decided that he might have to go back to paper and copy-paste for now, and Speaker Notes was meant to ship the next week. But what we wanted to do was generate excitement around the company. And so we wanted to make it such that anyone in the company could hop in and vote on this secret debut of Figma Slides. Yuki said it would suck if we crashed. It probably would have. But we still thought it would be worth opening up beyond the team. And then Yuki became OK with the crash. And so at the end of Chris and Yuki's product keynote, the opening keynote of this year, there was a reveal, much like what Dylan did last week at Config, where we basically showed off that the entire presentation, unbeknownst to everyone, was made inside of Figma Slides. And that generated a lot of hype inside of the company. A few weeks later, I posted inside of our cross-functional leads channel, hi, 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 hi. I have secret confidential news. Please don't tell anyone. Slides will be announced at Config, yay. And so last week, we launched Figma Slides, and step 3 became complete as well. Now, before wrapping up, I have 4 parting thoughts for all of you, for anyone who is looking to ship bottoms-up change or drive a 0 to 1 project inside of your own company. The first is find your people. This is the phenomenal team, or a portion of the phenomenal team behind Figma Slides. And yes, I did make the entire team do a photo shoot in front of a bunch of slides. They're also talented, and I'm very lucky to work with them every day. And something to call out is that different people work well with different folks. So I'm sort of a really weird PM. I don't really write PRDs. And I learned that my engineer, Carl, doesn't even know what a PRD is. Match made in heaven. Look at that. We have this love note that another engineer on our team, Jessica, made for the team on Valentine's Day this year. She talked about what it was like working on Slides. So there are a few things that I'm not sure you can see quite clearly, but the entire team took their profile Slack pictures with the same backdrop so that we could all match each other. Here we have kind of an average Slides thread, which is 122 replies long. And finally, Noah, a Gen Z engineer on our team, has introduced us to a new vocabulary where everyone now introduces themselves into a chat with, yo! It's really fun. It's on my laptop. Last week, after we launched Slides, we had an awards ceremony for the team. And an engineer on the team, Laura, said something which was really special. I think what's pretty interesting is that if you kind of bring exceptional people together, that attracts more and more exceptional people. And Laura spoke about how she always thought that in order to work with all her idols inside of the company, she would need to hop around and switch teams. And the Figma Slides made it easy for her because they all joined one team together and got to work together. And so I think it's really important to kind of find your people and make sure that it's the people who, like I said, are begging their managers to take that leap because they're really magical. Second, build a brand. We've been talking about this all day. This is the original brainstorm where Slides was born. This happened in the same file as the 3-step Slides plan for going to market. The option that everyone wants, Slides, the awesome suggestion. In January 16, 2023, I added it to my personal dictionary. I was annoyed that it kept getting underlined. At a later date, it got kind of taken over by the company. Our animations sync was called the Flanimation sync. Our layout workstream was called the Flayout workstream. And whenever we joined a Zoom meeting on Friday, I would wish everyone happy Fly Day. Fast forward to last week, where Slides became the word of the day. Woo! Third, be delusional. A lot of people are going to be skeptical, and that doesn't mean that they're, trying to put you down or anything. It's just you need to, if you're pushing something forward, be way more optimistic than everyone around you. And so, at no point in this journey did I ever let myself believe that this project wouldn't be ready in time for config. And that was really important. Not only that, but on November 17, 2023, there is a prediction that Dylan will give the keynote. Dylan will fake end the keynote. Dylan will reveal that the keynote was made inside of Slides. And that came true last week, which was pretty special. And last but not least, don't manifest. This probably sounds really weird. You're probably like, Mihika, isn't this all manifesting? So manifesting is this word that has become very trendy lately. I think manifesting is pretty dumb. And the reason I think so is because manifesting kind of says this thing of, hey, if you say this thing over and over again, and if you wish for something enough, eventually it'll happen. And my take is that that's pretty passive, right? If you want something, don't just wish for it. Don't just say it over and over again. Do all the things you need to do to make that happen. And so I actually took this picture yesterday, right across the room. It was very cool to see Figma Slides, kind of like blow up on Twitter and to see all of the digital assets. This was the first time I had ever seen Figma Slides printed in real life on a wooden board, and that made it incredibly real. And so for anyone who's looking to, make that dream a reality, you can do it, and it's not manifesting. Thank you.